So there's one more piece to this whole Webpack puzzle that we need to solve before we crack on with the UI library, and that's what to do with our CSS. So I like to keep all of my CSS for the UI library, all the styling of basic components that we make in it, to be kept inside the source folder, inside the Ninja UI folder, so that it's together with the JavaScript for the UI library. That makes sense to me. Then when we need to use that CSS, we just import it from a JavaScript file. Now to do all this, it means we have to process all of our CSS files for the UI library through the Webpack module system, just like we did with the JavaScript files. So looking at the webpick file down here, this is where we're configuring our rules for the module system. Now right now we just have one rule, which is passing our JavaScript through the Babel loader, but we need to make now another rule which is going to pass our CSS through a couple of CSS loaders. So the first thing we need to do is install a couple of loaders to do this. So I'm going to cancel out of the process going on down here, and then I'm going to install these. To do that, we'll say npm install, and the first one is called the CSS loader, and the second one is called the style loader. Then we need to save these to our dev dependencies. So hit enter and install those. So the CSS loader is going to help Webpack to collect CSS from a CSS file when we import it, and the style loader takes that CSS and it adds it to our HTML page. So now we have those installed, let's set up the rule for these. So down here, after the first rule, I'm going to do a comma, then do another object for the second rule. We need a test property, which is going to be much like this one here. It's a regular expression. This time we're going to test for CSS files. So /, then \dot to say we're looking for a dot first of all, then CSS, then $, to say this must be at the end of the file name. Then we close off the regular expression using a /. So that's what we're testing for, any CSS file. Now we need to say what we want to use this time, and up here we had the loader and some options. Now we don't need the options part down here because we don't need to specify any kind of preset. We just need to say what loaders we want to use. So we don't need to open this up into an object because we only need to specify the loaders. Instead, we can just say here an array of loaders because there's two loaders that we want to use. We want to use the style loader and we also want to use the CSS loader. So the order is important here. It runs from right to left. So first of all, it's going to use the CSS loader to collect the CSS from the CSS files when we import them. And then we use the style loader to add that CSS to the HTML document. And that's all we need to do for this rule to configure these loaders. So now whenever we import a CSS file into a JavaScript file, then it's going to run that CSS through these loaders to add that CSS to the DOM, or rather to the HTML page. So let's give this a whirl. We need to restart our Webpack server over here. So to do that, we know to say npm run serve, like so, and then I'm going to come over to source and I'm just going to create a new file, and this will be called test.css, and inside here I'm just going to do a background property for the body. So I'll say body, and then background is going to be orange. Okay, so now we're just applying this style to the background of the body. Now if I save this at the minute, and if I try to run this by opening up this URL that we have right here, control click, then at the minute we're not going to see that CSS rule, and it's not going to be in the HTML because we've not imported this CSS file anywhere else. We need to import it into something like the index file, which is ultimately being bundled up here, because those loaders only run on the CSS when we import it. So what I'm going to do at the top of this file now is import that file. I'm going to say import, and then it's // because we're in the current same directory as the index. Then we want test.css. So now that imports this CSS, and when we do that and Webpack does its thing and runs all of this stuff, it runs the CSS through those loaders, and now it will be output to the web page. So now we can see over here we have all of this orange background, and inside the head of our document we can see this style right here. So that's what the second loader does. Over here inside webpack.config, this style loader is the thing that adds this style tag to the HTML page and outputs the CSS when we import it. So we'll be using this idea of modularizing our CSS for the Ninja UI library, and then we'll be importing the CSS as we need it. So I'll be storing all of the library CSS inside the Ninja UI folder, and inside this we'll create a new folder just for the styles. So let me create that. I'm going to call it styles and press enter. And now all of our CSS is going to go in here for the Ninja UI project. So now we're all ready and set up so that in the next video we can start to create our first component, tooltips.